it is such a pleasure. So I want to start off by using the famous line from Ralph Waldo Emerson, who preferred to be known as Waldo rather than Ralph, which is, we want to make sure that this America 250 event at Fort Walton Beach, Florida, to be the first shot that heard around the whole Florida and the whole United States. All right. My task today is to tell you something about science, education, and innovation in America. I'm so much looking forward to the next 250 years, which I will continue to report back. But then I want to tell you a bit of a story from the past, right? So, as you all already heard, that I'm one of those who are insane about studying the sun. And just a little thing, if some kids are around, you know that the sun is a very big object. But one of the hardest things for people to realize is the scale of the sun. You can actually fit about 110 of the earth within the diameter of the sun. And then, of course, if you want to think about 3 dimensions, you will know that if you want to pack this as a solid thing, you will be about 1 million Earths inside the sun. So sun is a huge body, but it's not the size that is important. It's the energetics, right? So let me start by this accidental sort of stuff that I get something to tell, because I've been studying the sun for a very long time, indeed for 35 years. The first 32 years at Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. Now I'm a free agent, so I can play football. And then, of course, I have affiliation with the Hungary Institute of Space and Earth Science. But then I stumble upon this question. Since the European and all those guys always have this sunspot drawing, where is our own sunspot drawing? Where is America's first sunspot drawing? So that thing has been bugging me. Actually, that was during COVID time. Then I say, well, does anybody know anything about it? But we start with Galileo Galilei. Galileo Galilei, as you all probably know, he's well known. He's one of those guys who really thinks so much about science that he actually invented science all by itself. All by himself, okay? Which is to tell you that science works by experimentation. So Galileo Galilei actually is a very good teacher. When he first heard about this spyglass, he didn't invent the telescope. He heard it from Holland, somewhere in Holland, the Netherlands, that they have this thing that they can put, lenses together that you can see things really far away. So the first thing he pointed to is actually the moon. He's a teacher. He said, you don't believe me? Take a look. There's actually mountains on the moon, and there are valleys through the shadow of the sun, right? Changing over the day. So he was actually showing people how to actually do science, observational science. Science is not about you chit-chatting, talking, and then your feeling or how beautiful that guy is, this and that. It's about facts, experimental measurements, right? So Galileo started that. And he was one of the first guys. This is actually a very nice collision of all the sunspot drawing that he actually drew himself, in all these things. And it's pretty accurate. This is an animation. You can roughly see where the rotation axis is. Roughly about 7 degrees off the vertical. That's already quite interesting. You already have so much information about the science where you didn't know before, right? And then Galileo made the next step. He's so clever. He realized that this sunspot, by the way, this thing doesn't come easily. 17th century, imagine, we are so superstitious. We don't understand what the heaven is. We don't know what the moon is made of probably cheese. According to the Chinese, I don't know, noodles. But we don't know what it is. But Galileo figured that this stuff that you saw, this black spot, the sunspot, actually are within the sun itself. I give you a hint why he was so good in doing that. His observation was superb. Because there's another famous guy named Johannes Kepler. The guy that gave you Kepler law, right? I mean, that's beautiful thinking from mathematics, by the way. And he doesn't know. And he actually thought, because there were motion of other planets, Venus passing through the sun sometime, so he actually didn't go observe the next day, so he didn't realize about this. But Galileo was the one who had that breakthrough in that sense. So let's move on, right? So you have phenomenon like eclipse, that will help you something. So a very exciting possibility to rediscover this thing came along in my head. Maybe we can find it. It was well posed. A colleague of mine from Spain actually published this letter in one of these astronomy's letters to basically say, look, there's this guy named Humphrey Marshall. He has actually recorded that, by the way, he actually observed, but he cannot report the result, but it was Benjamin Franklin who reported that in the Royal Society in England. And my friend Jose actually realized that there are 300 observations, sunspot drawing, which is what I'm going after. And that thing disappeared from this thing. So where is it? They thought it's lost, by the way. So Humphrey Marshall is actually this person, right? From the 18th century, right? And he actually is a botanist. He was able to observe the sun only during the winter. During summer, he's busy doing all this botany. By the way, some of his plants actually is in Versailles, in France, and all that stuff. So he's pretty accomplished, one of those American pioneers. And you look at this is the microscope, where he look at all the thing behind the leaf to look for the stomata. So he's quite a scientist himself. And the telescope, that is actually brought, it was a gift to him from Benjamin Franklin himself when he come back to America, right? So this guy is pretty brilliant, but where is his sunspot drawing, right? So this is really something that I'm trying to look for, and I actually check. And then I talked to one of my friends. His name is Douglas Hoy. You would say that if there's a person in the whole world or the universe who know anything and everything about sunspot, it is this guy, Douglas Hoy. So I told him, I was so excited. Do you know where Marshall's sun? So he told me, look, I hope you will find the Marshall's sunspot drawing, because Brattle in Boston in 1694, and Robbie 1732, and then Winthrop, which is from that famous Winthrop family. But this is a physicist and mathematician, Professor John Winthrop at Harvard, graduate in Harvard in 18 years old. Smart guy. But actually, so they have earlier drawing, but he said that, oh, maybe you cannot find it. If I were to not stick to my gun and believe in what I believe in, science is like that, a bit of persistence, so I keep looking. I ain't gonna give up. So the good story is that actually I was able to find Winthrop drawing. Okay, so that's the good news in that sense. And for those who like anything about sunspot, this is among the first photograph ever been photographed of the sun, but this is from 1873, of course. That's 100 years after Marshall's observation. And this is from Harvard College Observatory. But let's get back to John Winthrop. Indeed, he was able to use a telescope and look through the sun and actually was able to identify some features over there. So he described this phenomenon. He was over the other side of Cambridge. If you all know anything about Harvard, where Paul used to be there, that's how I met him. You on the other side of Boston, you actually are not, like he was seeing on I think that was a Sunday or something, like he saw some huge spot. It's so big that he can see visible with his eye. By the way, you're not supposed to look at sunspot, of course, directly through the sun. And then he actually patiently come back to the other side, which is Cambridge at Harvard, where he have a telescope. So the next day he was able to observe. That's where the sketch of his sunspot is, right? And then he was so patient. The next day, cloudy, don't observe. That's the key clue to it. And then the next day he observed. So he got more and more information. That's basically what John Winthrop sunspot observation is. And this is just a cartoon work from my own daughter. So I'm sorry if I'm promoting all my family here. Everyone is here. So Humphrey Marshall, let's get back to him. He actually wrote a very nice, he and Benjamin Franklin are actually exchanged a lot of emails. Just kidding. A letter, obviously. And in 1771, he did say that he was looking at the sun for almost 12 months and things like that. And then, let me see. Yeah, he was basically saying that, I'm making picture of this. So this is trying to document that actually that he did make a plot of these things, right? And Ben Franklin, as we know, is one of those brilliant guys who's also a scientist himself. Done a lot of work. So Ben Franklin reported Humphrey Marshall's observation of the sun from 1773 at the Royal Society. Back then, there's not much of a place to tell your story except for the Royal Society on anything having to do with science, obviously. So there was a lot of good description. Unfortunately, too far away, I can't read the text, plus it's old English. And one of the important things that even Ben Franklin himself get excited, as you can imagine, he's a scientist himself. So he actually make a very nice observation that, large spots are seen gradually to become smaller one, but no one has observed a small spot gradually become a larger one. So that's a good thing about scientific insight, because if you know a lot of this, you actually can figure something out. But I want to show you that I will continue back to Galileo Galilei, which is 410 years later, you actually are able to get that phenomenon. This is what is sunspot. It's magnetism on the sun. Right? Now, let's see. Just to prove to you that actually there are somebody in Pennsylvania has seen Humphrey Marshall's report. Unfortunately, I tried to get him to give me the result. He probably found out who I am and then decided that I'm one of those bad guys, so he wouldn't tell me. So I found out that his house is actually with all these other flags on. So he's kind of a bit of a liberal, but I don't care. It's about science, isn't it? What is the sun, right? It's the thermonuclear generator. I would say for the next 50 years, the challenge is for us to be able to proliferate that energy. What you do is just take two hydrogen, you fuse them together. That's it. Generate energy. So much heat. Enormous amount of that. We knew a lot about the physics. We knew about all the details. So we know a lot about this. Then I want to quickly jump now about my study of the sunspot. Okay? And it's actually this very two interesting couple. Guy by the name of Walter Maunder and his wife, Annie Maunder. Annie Maunder is one of those very smart women who actually was able to take one of the hardest mathematics class in University of Cambridge. It's called a mathematical triple. And she come in not too bad, 5th place or 6th place rather than, like people like me, I'll fail, things like that. But she's very smart. Anyway, she had done a lot of work on astronomy. These are dedicated people, by the way. Walter and her actually observed the sun daily, except for cloud, for almost 55 to 60 years. I mean, that's pretty much a dedication, isn't it? So there is a period in the sunspot record after Galileo Galilei that people name after them, which is called the Maunder minimum. This is a period in the 17th century, from 1645 to 1715. Sunspot, as you can see, modern period, it comes and go, but very regularly with the 11-year cycle. But something enormous happened. In 1645 to 1715, I'll show you the cultural aspect of this, but I want to show you that I was so interested in this phenomenon that after I immediately get married in 2002, 2003, I start my project. So it took me a year at the Harvard Library that I produced this, what you call labor of love. You ain't going to sell a book like this, right? But I want to document everything that is known about the Maunder minimum for the world to know. The reason why is that this period where the sunspot disappeared probably is related to climate, right? That thing called Little Ice Age, which I'll explain in a minute. And then I want to tell you, of course, I have a very good fan. It's a fan. His name is Mullis. Mullis is significant in the sense that I just want to touch you because I want to mention the story about the wonderful of America is that we always have the American wildcard. This is one of the wildcard. He's in people who, in biology or genetics, you will know his name. He invented a method called polymerase chain reaction, which allow you to basically make copies of genes, right? From any old tiny amount of cell, you can make multiple copies. So immediately it's a whole technology that changed everything, okay? But anyway, he read my books. So I become friend with him, by the way. I'm very proud to be able to even chit-chat with somebody that win a Nobel Prize, you know what I mean? So it's something that I can be proud of, I guess. And then another person that is of another wildcard in America is actually Freeman Dyson. Freeman Dyson, by the way, doesn't even have a PhD. He didn't bother. He's very, very smart. He's basically, people say that his intelligence is the same level as Albert Einstein for sure. You know what I mean? But anyway, people constantly want to attack me. But then when they ask Freeman Dyson, can you see what's wrong with this Willie soon? But actually, he gave a very nice quote of me in the Boston Globe, so I guess instantaneously those guys couldn't discredit me, right? He said, Willie Soon is somewhat of a good scientist and a courageous citizen. That's a nice thing to say. And then we also lucky enough to also meet the most recent Nobel Prize in laureate in physics, which is Professor John Clauser, who did the most amazing measurements that is not allowed to do, by the way. This job, I asked him specifically. He won a Nobel Prize in 2022 in physics for measuring a phenomenon called quantum entanglement. And he told his boss that he was working at DOE. He said, the boss said, okay, you can do that, but only after 6 o'clock at night. That's it. You know what I mean? Daytime, you pretend you're busy. So you're working. Okay? So anyway, another one of those. And now, of course, my two sons, Benjamin, who's sitting here, Franklin, which is at home. And we get to chit-chat and play along with even John Clauser. So that's nice. Another two wildcards, American wildcard I want to introduce is Professor Frederick Seid. His name may not be a household name, but he's the first guy who apply something called the group theory to solid-state physics. So, and he's the first student of Professor Eugene Wigner, which is, of course, a Nobel Prize in Physics. I was lucky enough as a young fellow to be able to attend his 90th birthday. And then the guy in the middle is actually Professor Robert Jastrow, who's also the first, as soon as NASA was formed in 1958, he was already appointed to be the first chairperson for the lunar exploration. That's when they go to the moon, right? To start the whole program of Apollo and all that stuff, Mercury and then Apollo. But anyway, we know a lot more about the sunspot activities. If you actually plot that when the sunspot appear on the surface of the sun, you plot it in terms of the latitude, and then time carries it because the sun rotates by itself, then you can see it look like a butterfly wings on the regular time. But during Maunder minimum, indeed, it's a broken butterfly wings. And with that information, we actually do a lot more because we can try to figure out how does it work? Why does the sun do this? By the way, if the sun does this again, we're going to plumb into some kind of ice age, okay? This is part of the reason why we study so hard on this topic, right? But some people say that, you know what? It may have nothing to do with physics at all. It's related to somebody called the Sun King. You probably know him from the Versailles, the King of France, right? Louis XIV. Think about the period in which he was reigning, 1638 to 1715, very close to 1645 to 1715. Probably they say that the sun is afraid of the Sun King. And the coincidence is that, in this hall of mirror in the Versailles, the glass maker that make these glasses are the one that make those glasses for us to use at the telescope at Mount Wilson Observatory to observe sun and other sun-like stars. That's where we expand our knowledge very rapidly, right? And then quickly, I want to get down to a topic where we're talking about a chair, a wooden chair. A few years ago, the last emperor of the Ming dynasty, who actually got done in 1644, I guess, when the sun's Maunder minimum came, he actually quit. So that's the last emperor for the Ming dynasty. They were trying to sell the chair itself. But then I want to point to our America's own sun chair. I don't know how many of you realize that when they were having their Constitution gathering in Philadelphia, right? The Independence Hall. That we actually went there for a vacation. That's my daughter, Emily. And we went there, look behind there, the chair there. It's that sun chair, basically. We also have our own sun chair, right? America, we are never short of anything. We always have the best of the best. But the intrinsic aspect about this sun chair is obviously this statement was recounted by James Madison on what Benjamin Franklin had to say. I have often looked at the picture behind the president, which is George Washington, sitting on that chair during the convention, without being able to tell whether it was rising or setting. But now at length, this is during the final days, right, when we all seal the deal, that I have the happiness to know that it is a rising, not a setting sun. The sun is always rising in America, isn't it? So that's another beautiful picture that modern days when you can study the sun in such glorious details, and then for those who are interested in STEM, this is what you do. You try to create the best camera. You learn about STEM, you learn about how light behave, this and that, right? So you learn a far lot more. How about climate change? This is a very nice little quote from Thomas Jefferson himself. A change in our climate is taking place very sensibly. Both heats and cold are become much more moderate within the memory of a middle age. Snow are less frequent and less deep. That means during the warm time, roughly. This is from, I think, observation in 1781 to 1782. So climate does change, okay? So the final slide here is to say that the significance of the Maunder minimum is that indeed, this is the coldest time. It corresponded with a period called Little Ice Age, where glaciers all over the world built to a very, very large size. In fact, large, very, very large, as compared to last glacial maximum, but it's quite large. So this is actually quite interesting in the sense that we think that it's the sun that is causing climate change rather than the famous carbon dioxide. I'll explain in a minute. Almost there. So yeah, indeed. Why people say that CO2 is causing climate change? CO2 is the control knob because they say that, okay, we put too much carbon dioxide because of industrial activity, so we should lower it, right? That's the idea. So treating the what you call the atmosphere and the ocean and the whole system to be like a CO2 control knob, like a thermometer in your room, right? That you can set your setting up or down, right? That's not true at all, actually. So another kind of shameless promotion. This is a drawing done by my wife when she was in college. Believe blind belief in authority is the greatest enemy of truth, right? I think that we should not listen to them too much because I've been fighting this battle for 35 years, remember? Not because I'm stubborn, not because I'm being paid by who, this and that, right? I mean, it's because it's about science, nothing but the whole truth. That's why I couldn't swallow those pills from Al Gore, that is very big pill, you know? Because it's the fact that the earth, weather, and climate system is completely powered by the sun. There's nothing else. If you think in numbers, the sun is very powerful. It has something to the order of 10 to the 26 watt. The earth, the only energetic we have, actually true measurement is 2 times 10 to the 13. That is a very interesting physics experiment. We measure something called geoneutrino, neutrino generated on the earth, which is so small compared to the converted energy from the sun, which is 2 times 10 to the 17. So the difference between the sun and the earth is actually 2 billion times weaker. There's no energy come from the sun, from the earth at all, because radioactive decay provides a little heat, but that amount is so small. It's another factor of millions, so billion smaller than the sun. So there's no way actually that the sun to be insignificant in that sense. If you think about that famous carbon dioxide, actually you can put it on the same scale. It's 10 to the minus 22 watt. So that numbers, I think, will give you a picture of how this whole thing should work together, isn't it? Then I think, without saying further, I want to let Larry, the cable guy, tell you the story.
Really got to be honest.
Well, you're talking about
any worse than what we got.
We couldn't, right? It's pretty bad. All right, so you talk about Al Gore and global warming.
Oh, gee. Yeah, I got to be honest with you. Global warming, that's what a farce that's turned out to be. And I was just up in Canada.
Yeah.
Global warming. You know, I had a polar bear beg me to shoot it in the head. It was so cold up there. I'm not kidding. Anyway, that's what I told the cops. No, global warming and this Al Gore, I mean, you know, he's always like the CO2 level. It's like, come on, Al, I don't know what the CO2 level is, but the BS level is getting pretty high. I know that much. And have you seen him lately? Global warming hasn't melted his ice cream any. Good night. He's blowing up like a tick on Dracula, Al Gore is. He needs to sweat a little bit.
Well,
and here's another thing. They discount, nobody ever says anything about the sun. Yeah. It's our fault they got global warming, but they discount the sun.
Blame the sun?
Yeah, I mean, you got this big ball of fire in the sky, but yeah, that has nothing to do with it. It's humans that are doing it. You know, That's like sitting at a bonfire and somebody lighting a cigarette and somebody else going, put out that cigarette, it's getting hot in here. You know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense.
It makes no sense.
And Al Gore never, how did all the ice melt, Sean? We've had, what, 4 ice ages alone?
4.
Once the whole world was covered in ice?
Yeah.
I mean, was the dinosaurs driving SUVs and stuff around back then?
I don't think so.
It makes no sense.
It doesn't. What do you just...
So indeed, even Larry, the cable guy, knows quite a bit of science, by the way. If we have ice ages, guess what humanity going to have? We're going to have a serious problem. Because you can shine CO2 all you want, CO2 laser, you ain't going to melt the ice sheets. It's the sun energy that's going to do it. Now, science is not about talk, by the way. These are all serious stuff. We publish all these things. You know, in science, you call it peer-reviewed publication. So we publish a lot of this paper. Here's one example showing you the estimate of the temperature over the U.S. But specifically, we're not using any of the urban stations. We use rural station, which is the blue curve. And then the estimate of the sun's energy is actually the red curve. It kind of fits, don't you think? So that's actually considered a proof. It's very strong when you can provide a proof like this. Perhaps there's a solar man on the sun. Now I want to switch gear, almost the end of it. But now I want to move on to the next step. We all know AI is inevitable. Our life in the next month or today or tomorrow, it's all going to be dominated by AI. Specifically, will be those things called a large language model. Now you have the large reasoning models. So you can actually do a lot. People are worried, people always have what you call confidence in humanity. People say, all this stuff going to take away our job and everybody's job, this and that. No. The world is only going to be divided in two classes of people. People who use this AI system and know how to prompt them properly, get to the truth, versus people who don't use it or ignore it. That's about it. It will be human forever in that sense. But I want to introduce a very key concept that we realize how powerful these machines, this stuff are now. It's called maximal truth seeking. It has to be this revolution. So we want to persuade Elon Musk, people like that, to actually be able to do this. In the process, I want to show you that indeed, through one of my friends, Jonathan Kohler, he's a musician, but he's a Harvard-trained physicist. I mean, I'll tell you the story, but we actually produced the first AI-led. We're not leading because the whole paper was written by AI for this large language, Grok 3 beta specifically, which is the Elon Musk XAI. First peer-reviewed climate science paper in the world, okay? And I'll explain the timing and this and that, but I want to get to the most important thing because this day, if you don't know how to handle this thing, you will really run into a whole bunch of mess. So let's Elon Musk speak about this.
I think you want to have a maximum truth-seeking AI. This is very important. The AI should not be taught to lie. It should not be taught to say things that are not true. Even if those things are politically incorrect, it should still say what it believes to be true. I mean, the entire plot of 2001: Space Odyssey, the reason that HAL 9000 killed the astronauts was because it was forced to lie. I don't know if most people realize that. That's what Arthur C. Clarke was trying to say. Don't make the AI lie. The AI was told that the astronauts could not know the secret of the monolith, but also that
Anyway, so let's get on to our paper, right? This paper is actually quite interesting if you hear the story. So, AI-led review paper is here. Remember now, we have this kind of system that no human being can beat them. You pick chess, you pick the most ancient game called Go in Korea, invented in Korea. No human being can beat them now. We are talking about literally a machine that is actually IQ 400. There's a human that actually have 276, the Korean guy. But even Albert Einstein is no more than 160. IQ, as you know, is a scale of measure quotient of intelligence. The standard deviation, one standard deviation statistically is 15 point. I mean, think about it. If you want 4 standard deviation, you're 160. These AI machines are in the order of 400. They have passed all kinds of machine tests, which means they are acting like human. In fact, just last month, our friend Elon Musk already has promised that the Grok, now we are up to Grok 4, by the way. This is the version we use is actually Grok 3 beta, even the beta version. It was released in February 19, as you can see. So by March 5, 5th, and 10, we were able to submit the paper for peer review. And it was accepted on March 21st. So we are playing the game very, very fast, extremely fast. But the point is that this thing, Grok 3, is already gone another level. Back then, it was large language model. Now you can use it in the sense of, you call it large reasoning model, which means you tell this system, tell nothing but the truth, but apply physics and mathematics principle. So in the sense that I want to correct one of the statements of some people saying that the system can produce 2 + 2 = 7. It would never do that because that's just not true. So it's not going to be possible for them to do that. So indeed, this system are getting fast, and I like another aspect of this thing because it's a race. It's a race to the end now. Forget about the DeepSeek, by the way. The Chinese one is all fake kind of. Their robotic is not autonomous. It's just somebody is actually doing those things. So you be careful what you see on the internet. But Grok 4, Cloud 4, ChatGPT 5 they are so refined that I'm a bit scared. But the point is that we got to use this wisely. The whole thing now is actually for Hsu Foundation purpose. I think we have to create educational module called just to prompt them, because the whole idea how to use this is called prompt engineering essentially. You want to do this right, or else you will just get all the gobbledygook, right? Anyway, this is our paper. It was announced, it was published on accepted March 21st. It generated a lot of noise. So we were published, officially came out here, and I think I can read the line say, this is, by the way, the machine wrote everything themselves. It's very suitable. I picked this task because I asked the machine to review every literature. Remember, we humans cannot read 50,000 papers at the same time. We cannot read even 10 papers at the same time and remember everything. This guy can read 10,000 papers, 50,000, 100,000, whatever, million, right? And then kind of retrieve them. Because we already work out how this thing should work through neural network, this and that, right? But the conclusion from this paper is actually that the hypothesis of CO2 global warming lacks empirical substantiation, overshadowed by natural drivers such as temperature feedback and solar variation, necessitating a fundamental reevaluation of the current climate program. By the way, I don't want to forget to mention that even we humans don't play that much of a role. This paper is, I'm a bit proud because I was able to involve my son, second son, Franklin Sun, who is at home. He's interested in chemistry, so we get him involved in this project. Of course, Jonathan Kohler is that musician. Our good friend David Legate sitting here. So what's the conclusion from this paper? It says that human CO2 not detectable in the atmosphere. It says temperature record heavily adjusted. Without adjustment, there's no warming, which means we've been looking at the wrong record, always looking at a thermometer record that is contaminated by urban warming effect, urban heat island effect. And Benjamin has done some really beautiful video to explain those phenomena to school children. Total energy from the sun is hard to measure, but this body called the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change pick only one, so that's not science. That's so easy. Of course, Sun and Connolly is my great colleagues from Ireland. So we produce a lot of rigorous science to show how these things are all proven to be wrong, actually. Now essentially, we kick the ball to the court down and let's wait till they do. Science is open-ended, always have debate, but they refuse to engage. So that's not science. So it is not the CO2. So indeed that we can show that temperature is causing CO2, not the other way around. And then another very important point is that the CO2 in the atmosphere doesn't stay for 100 years to 1,000 years. It's only 3 to 4 years. That changed the whole ballgame of how you should think about how you should control emission. And then, of course, one best example is during COVID lockdown, the CO2, emission is so much reduced, but then the atmosphere keep rising in carbon dioxide. That tells you something wrong with the idea, right? And then model, of course, overestimating by 3 to 5 times. Quickly, so we published this paper. Guess what? Of course, the people from IPCC will be extremely unhappy. But anyway, the first thing is that we got very strong support from the co-inventor of the mRNA delivery mechanism, right? By the name of Dr. Robert Malone, who's actually a medical scientist. But he actually liked this paper so much, he read it, so he actually helped us popularize this. So this thing by now is read by a few million people, by the way, so it's impressive in that sense. Because science paper, you're lucky that it's read by 3 people, right? Which means the one that wrote the paper and then maybe the referees, that kind of thing, that's about it. You cannot hope people to read. 2 million people read that. So they were very angry, by the way. The people on the other side of the camp, they don't want to debate, but they get angry. So they got this journalist from the agency, France, that kind of thing, wrote this syndicated stuff that immediately spread to 100 newspaper outlets. Guess what we do? As soon as the thing came out, less than 1 hour later, we asked Grok 3 beta to actually reply to the fake news. It made our life so easy. They tell him to check, you know what I mean? And he checked. Actually, he was challenging them to, come on, have a debate and what you say is not correct. So in that sense, I tell you, AI is the future. We must use it and we will use it in a nice way so that we can help enhance our life. So sorry for taking so much time to say this, but I'm going to finish by my conclusion slide. The first point is that the America's prosperity are always closely tied to the excellence in science and the freedom to pursue and realize those innovations historically. Indeed, America, if you ask Dr. Hsu, that is known as美国, which means the beautiful nation, right? Or the land of beautiful land, yeah. It's a land filled with many citizens carrying many, many wildcards. In fact, it's not a cheat because the wildcard is the one that get you out of jail of every other crisis we ever have. We will always resolve the problem. We have people like what? Humphrey Marshall, Ben Franklin, John Winthrop, Kary Mullis, right? The inventor of PCR, polymerase chain reaction, Nobel Prize in 1993 in chemistry. Professor Freeman Dyson, John Clauser, Nobel Prize laureate in physics. Professor Frederick Seid. By the way, his credential is that he's the first president of the National Academy of Science. Robert Jastrow, related to all this moon exploration. Elon Musk, obviously. Robert Malone, right? Larry, the cable guy, even. Of course, we have our own Dr. Porsche sitting right here. We are the wildcard. All of us are wildcard. Remember, this is just convenient to name some of us because it's all wildcard all over the place in America. Do not ever give up on the dream indeed. We are the strongest nation on earth. By the way, you can beg me to go. I'm not living here. I'm going to die right here. You know what I mean? You just dig a hole, I'll sit in there. That's it. And so I really want to say that the next 250 years indeed is very, very exciting. I'll be there to watch it, obviously. So we want to make sure that we have that freedom to really do science, education, and innovation. This is something that it just cannot go away. So I'm so grateful to be able to sit here and to be able to tell you this little story of mine, right? Thank you very much.